I've said it for the last few years, however long we've been doing the Matt Barrie Show presented by Allstate here on the ESPN College Football YouTube channel. We released the college football playoff rankings. Everyone screams, everyone yells. In the grand scheme of things, you just look at them, you laugh, and you say, those don't mean a damn thing. And here we are, the Sunday after the very first college football playoff rankings, and football college has been thrown on its side after another day of upsets. We welcome you into the Matt Barrie Show presented by Allstate. It is time now to check in with Paul Finebaum, presented by Allstate. And Paul, we saw it. We knew it was coming. I said it on the Thursday night broadcast that someone huge is going to get got. And Saturday, two people, two teams, and we're set up for chaos. How are you this morning?
Yeah, no, I mean it's so confusing whether it's in the SEC or Big Ten. Trying to figure out the playoffs right now makes no sense. We'll do it again Tuesday night. It still won't make a whole lot of difference. Saturday's where the action is, not Tuesday night.
Yeah, and we'll peel this back layer by layer with some of the stuff that happened on Saturday. We'll start in the SEC. I want to start with Ole Miss and Georgia. Ole Miss wins 28-10. Second time in school history they've beat a team in the AP top two. I want to attack this first from the Ole Miss side. We've been on here for 11 weeks. We've been talking about how Lane Kiffin has the team to get it done this year. They've come up short twice. They knew their season was on the line on Saturday. And Paul, from my eyes, I don't know what you saw. Ole Miss dominated Georgia from start to finish. They were the better team on Saturday.
It wasn't close. And Matt, let me say it to be front end. I'm as guilty and maybe more guilty than anybody else. The narrative that Lane Kiffin can't win the big game just gets stuck to him. Fair or not fair, you can never say that again. That was the biggest win of Lane Kiffin's career, and I'm really happy for him because he's a guy that we pay attention to all the things that don't matter, but at the heart of the matter, he's an elite football coach, and he proved that yesterday. And what happens to him from this moment, I don't know. But you can never say he can't win the big one. I mean, he slew the biggest dragon in college football yesterday, and it was just almost it was a pummeling. And almost wasn't even trying to score at the end of the game. They had to kick field goals because they were just doing the math. I mean, it was a bludgeoning. And to watch Georgia, just be disemboweled was almost scary to the eyes. But Kiffin built that program after losing to Saban every year, and finally last November, Matt, just getting just blown apart by more than 30 points in Athens. He decided, I can't do this anymore the
Yeah.
conventional way, and he ended up getting 17 starters from transfers, and his football team is amazing. I don't know how they've lost a game this year. They easily could be the number one team in the country had they not just completely wasted the Kentucky game and melted down in Tiger Stadium. But they're still one of the best teams in the country, and it's hard to imagine a more dangerous team heading into the final couple of weeks of the season.
I'm glad you brought it up because, first of all, Lane's an interesting guy because he's an offensive. I mean, he can call ball plays as good as anybody in the country. It's funny because you watch him during the games, and even right after the game. Look, I know the students stormed the field early, and he was really angry about that. And he probably should have been. But it's like, Lane, enjoy the moment a little bit more. He looked as if he wasn't enjoying what was going on. He probably did afterwards. But it's funny watching him because he did say after last year's game, and you saw the fruits of that statement yesterday, in that he's like, we don't have guys up front. We're not big up front. We can't compete with Georgia on both lines of the sides of the ball on offensive and defensive lines. We got to go find those guys. The work that they put in was for yesterday's game to prove that they go up front with the biggest, baddest bullies in college football. And they did that. So that's check one. Lane did exactly what he said he was going to do, and he got the Georgia win. It is puzzling how they dropped a couple of games based on what we saw from them, and that's kind of the up and down nature. It's like, how did that happen? Why did that happen? But big picture, now you look at Ole Miss, Florida, and Mississippi State. Barring anything absolutely insane in a rivalry game. You saw what Texas did to Florida yesterday. We'll get to the Gators in just a couple of minutes. But barring anything insane, Paul, Ole Miss is going to be sitting there at 10-2, likely not playing in the SEC championship game, a win over Georgia. they've got to be feeling really good about themselves in Oxford this morning based on yesterday's outcome, based on the schedule, and based on everything that's happened in front of them.
They are, and yeah, listen, he is different. Lane, but Lane wears a mask, as you know, Matt. You've been around him, and he doesn't show emotion. And he's been through a lot. He was a coach way too young. He went through some difficult times. He got exiled, and this is the coronation of an incredible comeback that began really in 2014 when he went to work for Nick Saban. He spent 3 years there, and they were difficult years,
Yep.
but they were necessary. And here he is, capable of anything, including winning the national championship. That's how good they are when they play at that level. And on the other side, Georgia just if they had been a dynasty for 10 or 15 years, it felt like yesterday was the end. But I know it's not because they're the kind of program that has been up and down this year. And for the first time, and they are now in a playoff eliminator at home against Tennessee. It's a monster game. It feels a little weird considering how poorly they played, and I'm sure many around the country are saying, "How in the world can they come back?" But they have what still may be the very best coach in the country, and how he can patch that offensive line back together, and how he can give Carson Beck an emergency infusion of confidence. I don't know, but playing at home will help.
Yeah, Georgia, they're kind of, it's ironic, by the way, and I don't want to skew off this too much because it's ironic that Georgia and Miami went down on the same day.
Yeah.
Because if you listen to the Matt Barrie Show presented by Allstate or wherever you get your college football discussion, big picture, we have long been saying that Miami lives a little too dangerously. And if you play that way throughout the season, a loss will find you. And Georgia, same kind of thing. Like first halves of games this season, they've not been good, but they're Georgia. They find a way to squeeze the life out of you at the end and get away with a win. Carson Beck, we saw it last week against Florida, a very depleted Florida team. They were pushed around, shoved around, found a way to get the win at the end. And at some point, Paul, if that's how you were going about your business, they wasted time against Alabama. You're going to get got. And Ole Miss did that to Georgia yesterday. And you're kind of looking at this program over the last 5, 6, 7 years has kind of been invincible. And now you're poking at him and saying, well, Ole Miss got him, Alabama got him. The quarterback is struggling. They're not explosive like we're used to. Georgia, to your point, still very much in the conversation, but they're fragile going into the final few weeks of the season.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people overnight were saying, "Hey, is Georgia done?" No, might be a week from now, but again, it's impossible to figure out the Georgia situation right now. But one thing we know, Ole Miss. Uh, Rarely do you see someone, call his shot and deliver like Lane Kiffin did yesterday.
And it was a great win for Ole Miss. Again, they are loving where they are this morning because of everything. And look, again, I'll pump the chest of the network because, well, that's where we work. But the college football playoff expansion, there are so many teams this morning that are done. Season's over. You're not sure where the guys will start opting out. You're not sure the state of the program at 2 losses. You're out. There are so many teams here on November 10th, Paul, that because of the new format, Georgia being one of them, Alabama being one of them, we'll get to them in a minute, Ole Miss being another, like Missouri. There are so many teams right now. It's like, hey, don't forget about them because there's 12 teams in right now and everyone's losing in front of them. The leaderboard's coming back to the pack. Guys are being left back into the field.
Yeah, you mentioned Missouri, not to spend a lot of time on them, but they were literally dead 2 weeks ago. They're looking. I mean, however they won that game, I'll never know.
Oklahoma's how they won that game.
Well, yeah, and that's a whole nother story for another day. But the fact that they're going to finish 10-2. And they are going to have to do a lot of beating. Eli Drinkwitz is going to have to make the rounds. I mean, he's going to have to appear on every radio show in America trying to get somebody's attention because they're very easy to forget, but they can only be helped. They're like the leader in the clubhouse at the U.S. Open at even par, and and the wind is blowing, but somebody might go out there and put some numbers on the board.
Look at Paul using a golf analogy on this here show. That just lights my wick because it made sense too. And Eli, look, if you want to come on, I think we got 1.6 million views last month. People will see it. Come on here and hang out on the Matt Barrie Show with me and Paul in the morning. Hey, one more thing on Lane Kiffin before we move on. Florida comes out this week, got Strickland. Billy Napier's our coach. Billy Napier's the guy. Billy Napier's the guy. There's a lot going on in Florida off the court and off the field at the moment, but the lane to the swamp for this year done. And now Lane Kiffin, I mean, who knows? Other jobs will come open, but that was put to bed this week.
It was, and Matt, it was one of the strangest releases I've ever seen. And what was even stranger than the release was the coalescing around it by pundits and commentators on our network and others. It was like, what a great decision. How brilliant. Give Scott Strickland credit for awarding a guy who comes close. I mean, he was only down by 42 points yesterday, and they were able to cut it to 32 or whatever the final score was. I have no idea. All to keep DJ Lagway. Are you telling me that DJ Lagway wouldn't have played for Lane Kiffin at Florida? So I mean, I don't know. I think it's over. I don't know because within 24 hours of that announcement, another scandal broke down there, which we'll not get into, but it's a pretty nasty allegations against the basketball coach, who was also hired by Scott Strickland. And there's a drumbeat right now for his head, Matt, as you well know. And it just, I can't tell you what's going to happen in leadership at UF because they have an interim president. But there was a lot in that statement about Billy Napier that left to be desired.
Yeah.
It was not very explicit. It looked like it was rushed out. Let's get this out. And then, of course, what does Billy Napier do? He lays another egg. Again, he really had no chance with a walk-on quarterback, but didn't look a whole. But it's still an ugly loss, and the season has spiraled out of control.
Yeah, 12 to 14 players listed out for the Gators. Texas comes out of the bye week. Quinn Ewers, a career high 5 touchdown passes. There was never really a chance. I've been one of those that have said, unless you know exactly who you have coming in, just why start over with the new head coach in this era? You know, the stories. Now, Pete Thamel was saying it yesterday on game day that most of the NIL money is tied up with freshmen and sophomores, which is the future of the program. But again, it's so in college football now, there's no such thing as a sure future because of all the tampering that goes on. So as good as that might be, freshmen and sophomores are getting all the NIL money at Florida. It doesn't mean that in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or even now aren't coaches going around being like, "Hey, a couple weeks, we can pay you. Just come on out." So it was odd that they would tie it to that.
But Matt, the biggest misnomer in the story was, or at least I heard from the pundits, and again, I do a show on Saturday with the most famous Florida player ever, so I'm not blaming him. He's just telling his opinion. But the fact that this is going to ignite recruiting. It's not going to change recruiting. They're still having they're still have I mean, how many high school recruits are going to say, "Man, I got to go play for Florida now for Billy Napier," when he clearly starts next season on the hot seat, just like he started this season on the hot seat. So if it turns out that he has a good season next year, and they were right, it will be a story much like the one with Mark Stoops about 8 or 9 years ago when they
Yeah.
went all in and he won had a couple of 10-win seasons. But the questions really are now more directed toward the athletic director at Florida than the head football coach. Will he survive?
I'm with you because the timing of this, I'd have to go back and look at all of it, but it seemed as if put the Napier stuff out before the basketball stuff came to
Right.
light and smoking. I don't know. Anyway, we
Yeah,
won't get into
by the way, having been a former newspaper reporter doing this type of work, you don't just call, especially when you're at the school publication, you don't just call the athletic department 10 minutes before the story. You probably called them a couple of days out saying, "We're working on this and we'd like to give you 24 or 48 hours to respond." And by the way, the first allegation against Todd Golden was filed in late September. And by the way, I don't have any idea about it. And Golden came out and denied it and said he has an attorney and all that, and good for him. The point being, uh, this I firmly believe that announcement was put out get ahead of the basketball story. And I believe I had the last interview with Scott Strickland on the first Friday of the football season when he sat there with me in Gainesville, Matt, and said that Bill, we're in it for the long haul with Billy Napier. He hasn't said a word since then.
Yeah, and we'll see how that transpires. But at least for now, AD in place, coach in place of the Gators, who they're probably who do they have? They have Charles. Who do they have this?
Ole Miss, they have LSU, Ole Miss, and Florida State.
Good Lord. Well, Florida State's winnable. They're 1-9, which is, I mean, I'm not going to put time into a 1-9 team here on the show, but that's not the biggest fall off in college football history
It
I
is.
mean, you know what? Hell with it. Let's talk about it for a second. They go from 13-0. I get it. Michigan's fall off. What are they? 5-4, 5-5 on the season after a national championship. That's one kind of fall off. From 13-0 to 1-9, while one of your star hit players is a head coach at Colorado that's got the Buffaloes and an opportunity to control their own destiny to win the Big 12 and make the playoff. I mean, we'll sit there in studio and be like, how do you go from 13-0 to 1-9?
No, it is the biggest fall off in college football history. I mean, Michigan, they lost their head coach. I mean,
Yeah. And
Florida
everyone else
State,
to the NFL.
yeah, I mean, I mean, it was not, I mean, 3 to 5 losses were projected. I mean, three would have been great, four likely, five disappointing, but Florida State was a top 10 team when the season began. There's no excuse for that. And Mike Norvell, has literally lost all the goodwill he had from a year ago. It's
Yeah,
gone.
we were, you know how we like to do this, but I was like, could you imagine? Let's just say Prime. They Colorado controls their own destiny. They went out, they're in the Big 12 championship. Based on what I was watching at 2 a.m. with BYU Utah, I know it's a rivalry, but there's nothing that says Colorado couldn't take care of Utah and make the
Right.
playoff. You're telling me there aren't people within the Florida State administration that's like, damn, should we go? I mean, Deion's ours. Deion can recruit. Deion's got like, should we kick those tires? Shador's gone. Travis Hunter's gone. That's going to be something that happens because of Deion's connection to Florida State and everything he did there.
Well, Matt, we both watch a lot of schools bring back the favorite son. And Deion, couldn't get a phone call from Florida State a couple of years ago, but in fairness, what had he done? Okay, um, he was now. I mean, he's one of the hottest coaches in the country. A lot of people were wrong. I was wrong. A lot of people were wrong, but that doesn't matter. That's who Deion is. He proves people wrong. But he's also arguably the most famous football player to ever step foot in that stadium, and that's including a lot of people, by the way. And yeah, it's inconceivable, or is it that Florida State would say, Deion, we want you back. Mike Norvell, we are sorry. We think you're a great guy. Here's your buyout. Catch you later. Because Florida State a year ago was talking to all the Wall Street banks about buying their way out of the ACC. They have no credibility now. They need an infusion more than any program in this country.
Yeah. And all right, this will be funny. I can't imagine because a month and a half ago, we'd be laughing at this because Colorado, we still didn't know a lot about him, but they've risen from the ashes. Deion's kept his mouth shut a little bit. I know that
Yeah.
sounds a little vicious, but he's quieted down a little bit. Um, but could you imagine a world? Because I can, because I worked there and I know him. No one thinks Mike McCarthy's surviving with the Dallas Cowboys. No one. Jerry loves that kind of splash. Could you imagine Jerry just being like, Deion, you know how to work with pro athletes.
Sure.
You don't have to recruit anymore. You get us a bunch of attention, surround yourself with assistants, and I got this thing going. I still don't believe that Deion Sanders is not going to be one of the most coveted coaches this cycle at any level.
Well, listen, I never really liked the Colorado job, but he's made the most out of it. It's been a struggle. He's already beaten the odds. It's a good time to get out. I mean, buy low, sell high. I mean, I'm not a broker, but that's not hard to figure out, and it's hard to imagine. It's just there's just too many complications out there, and you are. I mean, he's on a big stage, but it's nothing compared to what he would be. Yeah, well, first of all, there is nothing that compares to Dallas. It's the biggest franchise in all of sports when it comes to attention.
Yeah. Anyway, we Paul and I have been known to get on tangents throughout the years. That's our tangent here on this version of the Matt Barrie Show presented by Allstate. Let's get to Alabama and LSU. Uh, Operator put me on through. I'm going to send you down to Baton Rouge. And Brian Kelly coming in 13-0 night games since he joined the program. And that was one of the most dominating, bludgeoning performances I've seen in that game. Two, here we sit, and Alabama's probably going to be in the college football playoff.
No, when they lost to Tennessee, it seemed over. They just didn't have a pulse. And they are back, and Kalen DeBoer has. I mean, he's coming close to cursing now. He, I mean, he's not. He doesn't look like the same coach we saw 4 weeks ago. And what do you say about Brian Kelly that hasn't already been cursed and uttered by tens of thousands of LSU fans? I mean, he went out and made a change at the defensive coordinator position. Looks like he might want to make another change. That was one of the poorest defensive schemes I've ever seen. Offensively, Nussmeier just simply, went in the tank. What we saw from LSU, Matt, should not have been a surprise. We've seen it every week. They screwed around the USC game. They absolutely shouldn't have beaten South Carolina. They beat Ole Miss in overtime on the final play to tie it in overtime and in regulation. And this is a team that's been living on the edge. And I'm foolish and many of us are foolish to think that they could correct it. They didn't. Brian Kelly now is going to have to sell winning 10 games again, as if anyone will be listening.
Yeah, here's what I'll say about because I think Brian Kelly's one of the best coaches in the country. And yeah, he's going to win 10 games at LSU for his first 3 years. I believe with LSU, when you look at the NFL and you see Brian Thomas Jr., when you look at the NFL and you see Jaden Daniels and what he's doing, when you look at the NFL and see Malik Neighbors and everybody that they're doing, I just think that it was hard for LSU to replace that kind of production and be a legitimate contender. Like, look, I know Nussmeier when he's good, he's good. I know Kyron Lacy's when he's good, he's good. But there was so much lost, Paul. I think we put it on them, and they weren't ready for it.
No.
But they're still going to win 10 games in the SEC, like on an SEC schedule.
No, well, because he is an elite coach, and therefore we expect him to do. And I'm not saying he should have prepared us better, because we all saw this. We all saw the flaws, but we all also bought in. I'm using the collective phrase. I frankly thought Alabama would win, because Alabama usually always wins.
Yeah.
But I think we just got hung up on false narratives. Oh, Brian Kelly's never lost a day at night. Well, he has lost in the daytime there. Uh, he he lost to Tennessee by 32 points a couple of years ago during at a noon start. But it's like the thing you saw all day yesterday, and you probably even uttered it because it was on the screen. This is the first time uh, Georgia has lost to someone other than Alabama. I mean,
Yep.
I mean, it's like those other three losses didn't count.
Yeah. It was a wild day. I just want to throw out some Jalen Milroe superlatives before we move on. 185 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns. Second player with 4 rushing touchdowns in Alabama history, joining Sean Alexander. 8 career rushing touchdowns against LSU, the most by a single SEC player against a single opponent since Tim Tebow. Finished with 185 rushing yards, the most by an Alabama quarterback since Stedman Shealy, of course. Who doesn't remember him? So it was just that kind of a dominated performance. And I'll say this, coming out of the bye week for Alabama, what did we sit on here and say for that 3-week stretch where they just weren't that good? The offense was stuck. Kalen DeBoer is like, you know what? I got the best guy in the field and Jalen Milroe. To hell with all this airing it out. If I need to throw it, I'll throw it, but I'm just going to run the big fella, and we're going to win doing it that way.
Yeah, and by the way, LSU knew that too going in.
Yeah.
Um,
Lastly, we've been on here for a minute. Miami goes down. Look, to Georgia Tech again. They've been playing so dangerously throughout the year. It was going to happen, but in this new era, Paul, they're still fine.
they are. What they're not is, in my mind, are a serious contender anymore. I mean, they looked really good, Cam Ward, the whole thing, but this is who they are. Someone was going to get them. It's no big deal because they're still probably going to get to the playoffs. Where it hurts the most, I think, is for the ACC. They
Yep.
probably lost a berth yesterday. They'll get the champion in, but I don't think they're getting anybody else.
That's exactly right. With them losing, like the Big Ten situated to get 4 teams in, as much as people cry and moan, SEC 2 loss teams are getting in. It's just when other teams and smaller conference, not smaller conferences, sorry, less potent conferences this year keep losing, you're going to open up the field of some of these other bigger conferences with the 2 loss teams. They got a bye week. They've got Wake Forest. They've got Syracuse, to your point, and with Pitt going down, Clemson's still around. But look, here's what we know. What's today? November 10th. How many more weeks do we have of the regular season? 3, 4.
Great.
Chaos is going to ensue because it did so yesterday. Paul, great stuff. Week 11 in the books. We shouldn't be surprised by anything because that's the sport of college football we love. For Paul Finebaum, I'm Matt Barrie. This has been the Matt Barrie Show on the ESPN College Football YouTube channel, presented by Allstate.